Are you looking for a fun and informative podcast all about training working dogs? Look no further than the LWDG Pod Dog. This weekly show is hosted by me, Joanne Perrott, founder of the Ladies Working Dog Group, and I chat to experienced trainers and experts in the field who will give you helpful tips and advice. Whether you're just getting started or you've been working dogs for years, this podcast will have something for you. So pull up a chair, pour yourself a cup of coffee and tune in to LWDG Pod Dog and let us help you build a better bond with your best friend. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Dog and Duck. We have, starting tomorrow, a launch coming with Sporting Saint. Now we've been working on this for a little while. I'm incredibly excited about it because this is something we've built as a community. Different people in the community worked with us to come up with this new product. This is the LWDG tennis ball wrap. So we were asked by Sporting Saint to collaborate with them and come up with a product. It was entirely up to us what the product was that we felt would help people. So we didn't want to go down maybe the expected route of being a ladies group and I don't come up with a bag or something like that. We wanted to come up with something that really would help people in the group. And we came up with this idea of a tennis ball wrap. And what it does, it's like a Velcro wrap that you can put around any dummy. It'll help the dog to hit the dummy in the right place. But also, I know a lot of you might already see this, your dog might be really excited around tennis balls. They love them, they go and get them, and might not have the same sort of excitement when it comes to canvas dummies. This will help them to get that same excitement. So I had the joy of trying out the prototype, and I'm sure some of the girls on here will back me up with this. Ella is not the biggest bone dummy retrieving dog you've ever met. She's not really fussed with them. The gun dog holiday, she was like, maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. These, she's gone and got every single one. She's hunted them far better. She's brought them all back to me. She's enjoying and engaging with them. I wouldn't like to go into the science of it, but I do want you all to know about it because it launches tomorrow. But anyway, so that's me yabbering over and done with. Tonight's Dog and Duck is going to be a little bit different. In the week we asked the question, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever been given about training your dog? I didn't know whether to be flabbergasted or shocked or laugh or whatever at some of the things that you wrote, and some of the like total nonsense that you've had to put up with. And I do really think it's nonsense. Like, some of you have been told appalling things about training. We thought tonight we'd just like chat about some of these and like talk about with the trainers, like not like where they come from, because nobody's going to know the history of the thing, but like what the idea was behind it and what the actual reality is now going forward. I'm going to read some of them out and then we're going to just like chat about them. One of the ones that sort of like made me sad, you have to break her. Like, I read that and I was like heartbroken. I'm sure others were. So trainers, where do you think this sort of concept of needing to break the dog, what's that even coming from?
That sentence makes me really sad, because when you see a dog that looks very shut down and it's working through fear instead of working through a desire to want to work in partnership with its owner, I think it's a really sad thing to see. And I think it's a very old-fashioned, old-school mentality of breaking a dog's spirit so that it works for you, I suppose, instead of with you.
I think it does come from when it was predominantly more male trainers and male handlers, when it was predominantly more of a male sport as well to work dogs. And it was the same with horses as well. We used to break horses. That's where that term actually came from, is because you literally trash their spirit until you put a saddle on them. And I just think things have changed, and unfortunately some trainers maybe haven't changed, and that's where that advice is coming from. And I do think is often given to a female handler because it comes from, oh, your dog doesn't respect you, and it will only have a bond with you if you're in charge and you're the boss, and all of those kind of terminologies that are, I think, outdated. And like Claire said, if you see a dog that has actually been broken, come to you either for like because you've either rescued it, or it's awful to watch them be so just, they have no personality, they have absolutely nothing. It's like a glazed over kind of, there's nothing in there sort of thing. And it's just really sad from a trainer's point of view to see dogs that have been put through that to get to that level. And I don't think they work very well either.
If you think about it though, like coming from a horsey background, when you say break a horse, it's not naturally part of a horse's instinct to want to work for you. A horse doesn't say, come on, let's go do this today. But a dog does.
I think a lot of it was that, people are trying to control another living thing's mind. And back then we didn't know anywhere near as much as we do now. And it was basically along the lines of, you need it to be your robot. You need it to listen to absolutely everything you say. And it wasn't a partnership. They were purely a tool. And they only ever came out when they had a job to do. And they weren't given any love and affection. It was literally I need to control this, because if I don't control it, there's a chance it might do its own thing and not do what I need it to do. So therefore, the general mindset, and as Emma said, it was a very male-led background, but the general mindset was, beat it until it is too scared to do otherwise. But a dog being a dog, they have a very sort of smiley persona, and they would, even if they were absolutely terrified, they wanted to do the job. So they would come out and do it. And you can see some that are, really withdrawn and really subdued, but others will put on a bit of a brave face and come out and go, well, I enjoy working, and actually it's almost worth the beatings because I get to go and chase pheasants, and that's pretty cool.
I hadn't even thought of that bit as well, and now that's maybe even sadder.
I think Sam hit the nail on the head, really. It's because people want these dogs that are push-button dogs, and not working with them as such. They just want to give a command and the dog goes out and does it. It doesn't matter if it runs out with a waggy tail or comes back at speed, it does the job, and that's that. And luckily dog training and horse training have both sort of evolved. They used to break the horse's spirit by like hobbling them and doing all sorts of horrible things to them. So the same process happens with horses now as well. So you get happier horses that don't mind people being on their backs, and it's not through a fear or an overpowering thing. But yeah, no, it is just a really sad topic, isn't it?
I like living on the edge with my dogs. I get to the end of a shoot day and I think, oh, thank God we made it through that one. They didn't do anything I didn't need them to do. But, it adds the entertainment for the day, I guess, doesn't it?
Not only that, sometimes we need our dogs to think for themselves and not be robots. When we send them for that bird that we don't know where it's fallen, we don't want them to just stand there going, oh, I'm too scared to actually go that way because it might be wrong, or that way because it might be wrong. And they actually use their brains.
Okay, let's go on to another comment. Harriet Chede. I got told to ignore the bad behaviour when my dog was a puppy. So this is like a complete other end of the spectrum now. We're ignoring bad behaviour. So what do we as trainers, or we, if that's the royal we, because I'm not a trainer, but what do the trainers think about that piece of advice?
It's another one that really, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? Because it's the same as people saying to puppy owners that their dog will grow out of bad behaviours. It's kind of linked to that. And the reality is, if the dog finds itself rewarding, then they're not going to stop doing it by you either ignoring it or by you, doing nothing about it and turning your back if they're jumping up. You've got to do something about it. If you don't tell the dog you don't want it to do it, then they're just going to keep doing it, especially if they find it self-rewarding. So it's just one of them ones you just got to bin over your shoulder and go, yeah, that's a rubbish bit of advice. See ya.
I think as well, you're not actually teaching either. If you ignore, you don't teach. Therefore, then how can the dog learn what it should be doing? It's almost like if you sent your kid to school and the teacher just sat down all day and didn't do anything, didn't tell them that they were right, they were wrong, they were doing this right, they were doing that wrong. And the kid came home from school again and you said, what have you learnt today? And then the kid will go, I don't know, because nobody gave me any constructive criticism, help, guidance, nothing. So ignoring something is kind of, you're ignoring the problem. You're not actually fixing or teaching anything.
Harriet, the lady who wrote it, is actually on here. Harriet, tell us a bit more about why you were told this splendid bit of advice.
So, do you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first got my dog, that was the advice I was given. And I did I did the really bad stuff of going on YouTube, researching all the stuff. And then I had other sort of trainer friends like, oh, you must scatter feed, which is again I've got a Labrador. It's the worst thing that I've done is scatter feed. And then also, I think I wanted sounds really silly, I wanted my dog to love me as well. So I didn't want to kind of tell him off. But then this is where the problem started. So he kept, I remember messaging Claire, keeps biting on the lead and he keeps pulling on the lead and he won't come back. And there's all these things. And then once I took control and I read the John Rogerson book, The Da Vinci Code, and I sat there and actually read that and took on board everything he kind of said, put it into my dog, and it was like, whoa. And then that moment, that's when I kind of fell in love with dog training.
You brought up a really valid point there, though, isn't it? But like, we all want them to love us.
Yeah.
But like, if you think about it, our mums and dads told us so many times, no, and you're not doing that, and all that thing, and that didn't stop us from loving them. They would just tell us there were things we couldn't do. But I think you're absolutely right. We get this concept that if we tell them no, that we somehow being bad dog owners.
Yeah, I think that's what I had, and and I wanted to be his world, his universe, and I realised that I can get that other ways by teaching him, guiding him, and it was the worst piece of advice. But however, I feel like I've gone on to like a massive journey since then.
Yeah, it's amazing how often we hear from clients that they don't want to be nasty to dogs because they don't want to ruin their relationship with their dogs and they want them to love them and they want them to do this. But actually, all dogs want is to have sort of what we call an effective leader, so they don't have to think about things, so they can go, is that right? Yeah, that's cool. And then they're so much happier. You see it when we start doing these sessions with people, that when they start taking back control, you see the dog visibly go, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to make those decisions anymore, and it's great, and I think you're awesome. And actually, their relationships improve, and it's just really nice to watch. So that's really good to hear, Harriet.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know whether the other trainers find this as well, but generally when a client comes to us that says, or to me and says, I don't want to tell my dog off because I don't want them to hate me or I want them to love me and things, generally those clients are really, really confused, don't quite know how to handle, can sometimes actually be a bit fearful of their dogs as well. And then also are super inconsistent with how they handle them because they don't know how to actually, they don't know whether they're ignoring, correcting, praising, and it's all really, really confused. And at that point, then for the dog as well, like Jem said, the dog is then so wound up because it has no consistency at home. It has no boundaries. It has no kind of almost relationship because the owner's so up and down that then it goes, when you do start to take control, it does have that moment where it relaxes and goes, oh, thank God, somebody's actually like in control now and I don't have to do this anymore. So yeah, I think that side of it is massive in the relationship as well.
But it's also coming from an incredibly well-meaning place. So if they don't know what they don't know, I'll put my hand up. And because we don't know how we get that without putting in boundaries, or if we put on boundaries, how strong should the boundaries be, blah, 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 what do they look like? Because we don't know what we don't know, we just end up being really, really confused, like you said, and that's where that inconsistency is coming from.
Yeah, I was just going to say it is really true, and a lot of people are really worried that applying a correction to their dog, and they don't even know what they mean when they say correction always. The first time they say it, they're thinking of something really, really bad, and they don't want to do it in case it damages the relationship. They've perhaps been told it will damage the relationship between them and their dog. And yes, harsh corrections, cruelty, abuse, you are definitely going to damage the relationship with your dog. However, most of the dogs I see for behavioural works are just super confused and really, really stressed because they haven't got leadership in their lives. So the dogs are exposing these unwanted, undesirable behaviours because they have no leadership. And the minute you apply some leadership and you reward the behaviours you want and you educate the dog that, no, these behaviours are not wanted, the dog can actually relax and you end up with a much more relaxed, contented dog.
We'll go on to another one now. It was written by Di, and I was told to make sure he looked at me before releasing him for a retrieve. The poor dog would mark a partridge in rape and then not be able to find it because he had taken his eyes off it. So, which one of the trainers would want to talk about this? Now, this is quite an interesting one, because should your dog look at you before it goes for a retrieve, or should we expect it to hold the mark?
Well, see, I actually do ask my dogs to look at me before I send them for a retrieve.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I look back through the thing just now. I thought, oh, did Di come to me? I don't think so. But I ask my dog to mark the fall and then look at me, and it's that kind of, am I going for that one? Because it might be that actually I want them to go for that one. And so if they're holding the mark over there, it's no good to me. I need them to look at me and ask questions. So I'm kind of going to go against that one. Sorry.
And that's what we love about this group, because it's about working in different ways. We're not all going to train the same way.
So mine's probably going to be super confusing, because when I'm teaching young dogs, I don't like them to look at me. But as it advances and their progressive training advances, for the same reason as Sam, when I'm actually actively working them, I require the eye contact. If that makes sense. And I don't actually, if I'm being totally honest, even know how, when, or where that changeover actually even happens, because it's generally once I start moving on to memories and blinds, where we're starting to line them out properly and stuff like that. That's generally when eyes move and heads start to move. But I want them to learn to mark. And I think if you interrupt the mark, you interrupt the picture, and then you don't get efficient marking. But then you do need them, especially if you're working multiple dogs as well. You do need them to kind of almost ask for permission as to whether it's their retrieve and which way they're going when you get to multiple retrieves and multiple dogs, if that makes sense.
It does.
So I'm going to be different again. So for me, I think it all depends on the dog as well, because my dog's is totally different, to the point where Red will mark something miles away. I almost require him to look at me because he's not quite as steady as his sister. So he will look at me, but he will run straight to that point and pick it up super quick. If Nuka did that, her brain is going so quickly, 10 miles to the hour, dozen, whatever. If she looked at me in between that mark, she would run to a completely different place and not pick it. So I don't interrupt her at all and make her insist on that contact. I know that she won't move, and if I say her name, Nuka, leave, or Nuka, not you, or whatever, she will disengage from that mark and I can send her somewhere else. So I think it is very dog dependent as well.
Okay, Claire?
What can I throw in the mix? Well, for me, it very much depends on the dog. So a good example, I'm working with a client at the moment whose dog can't mark very well at all. So the last thing I'd want that dog to do is take its eye off the mark. And the owner had actually been teaching the dog to look away and ask for permission before sending, which was why the dog has never learnt to mark, because from a very young age, the dog would look at the owner for quite a few seconds, and then he'd send the dog, and the dog would take ages to find the retrieve because it hadn't learnt to mark an area of fall. It's a bit like what Jem said with a young dog. Very often, with probably 90% of them, I won't want them to take their eye off the mark until I've taught them to mark. But then later on, if there are multiple dummies and I need to break the dog's focus from one to another, I will move the dog. I will get them to turn at heel with me. So inevitably they'll take their eye off that and look at something else. Do I get them to look at me? Very rarely, in all honesty. I might get them to look away if I'm lining them for a different dummy, but not very often look at me unless they're facing me. So there throws another spanner in the works. So I think it really, for me, very much depends on what I'm training, with the dog I'm training, the level of that dog, the level of that handler, and the dog's ability to memorize the area of fall of a mark. Ta-da.
Fantastic. Nikki?
Yeah, following on what from Claire said, is for me it's exactly that as well. It depends on the dog, what it is I'm asking them to mark, what situation you're in. So my youngest dog, if I leave it too long, he will look back at me and then he's lost the mark, and then I have to handle him onto that dummy. So I'll send him fairly quickly if it's me. Of course, if it's in a test, I have to wait for the judge to tell me. So then I'm like, don't look back. I taught him to have eye contact with me early on, and so now, and he's so quick, and he looks at me. So now I'm like, right, now I'm going to have to teach him differently. But of course, if I was then on a shoot with him, then I do want him to look, because if you're there picking up and he's not to pick some of those birds up because they're another dog's birds, then I do need him to look at, and I can send him on the right way. So there's the bit there about what it needs to be, for the job, really, the dog and the job that you're trying to do.
Fantastic points. Emma?
Yeah, so just to add, like, I agree with Claire. If they're facing me to be sent for a directional, then I need eye contact. I need them to come off of that because I might direct them the other way, and I need them to look at me. I don't ever send a dog just on its name, because its name will be its interrupter to get it to come away from that retrieve and either look at me or look where it's going to be pointed out to next. And initially so as a puppy, I start by teaching them to mark, and then I've got control to pull it off, rather than teaching the eye contact and then trying to do it in reverse and teach to mark. I think that's more difficult. So I like them to learn to mark first, and then as long as the steadiness is there, you can then control them coming off the mark. Whereas if you've focused on eye contact too early on, it's much more difficult to teach them to mark, because they've been conditioned to look at you and look away from the mark to be sent for the retrieve. That's their reward. So they'll learn to come off the retrieve to look at you to be sent, if that makes sense.
I'm sure it does to many. I think I've kept up with you all. But this is quite an interesting conversation, because this is what I love about this group. You've all got different variations of training the same thing, which is making me think about how I train and why I train that way. Hope that makes sense. Anyway, right. The last thing I want to say, because we've run a little bit over, you're all still here, so I hope you're all enjoying. The last one I want to read out. I thought we would get through millions, and we've done like 3. This one, I just don't even know about it. Quick, like, round robin. Fast your dog for 24 hours before you take it beaten. What is that even about? Is there any logic in this? Was this a old guy's thing? What was it?
No. Okay, so the theory behind it, it isn't, but the theory behind it is, if you fast your dog for 24 hours before a shoot day and then you feed it in the morning, it speeds up their metabolism, therefore makes them hunt harder, hunt quicker, and in general work better. It's a load of I'm not going to swear because you record this. It's not true whatsoever. A dog's metabolism cannot be sped up by a 24-hour fast. It doesn't happen. If anything, what you're going to do is you're going to pull the fat storage out and the muscle storage out, and you're going to eventually get muscle depletion, because they'll go into starvation mode and they'll pull their energy resources out of muscles, and therefore then you're more likely to get hypoglycemic shock and things like that, and sugar levels dropping and all of that kind of stuff, because you're also then on the morning of a shoot day giving them a huge sugar boost by giving them their food after fasting, and that's when their body will go into overdrive and use it in the wrong way, is my quick nutrition advice. There you go. Sorry.
And I'm absolutely understanding it. Like, you never hear a marathon runner has fasted for 24 hours before. If anything, it's the other option, which they eat quite a lot of, like, complex carbohydrates to build up energy stores. So I'm glad you've done that one for us. There were loads of other ones where, when I read through them, some of them were shocking, like I said. Some of them, when I read through them, and if you haven't read through them, go and read them on the open community, but also go read them on the Facebook page as well, because there were more there. There were some of them where I was like, oh, would I class that as bad advice? And it is quite interesting. It's worth reading through them for you to spend some time reflecting on them and thinking, well, what do I think of that? Because that's going to help you in a very fast way. We've explained this in the group before. You can learn like in layers. So one dog, think of one dog as one layer. You've learned with one dog on that layer. Trainers see lots of dogs, so they learn they see lots of different behaviours. People who've had a lot of dogs all their lives, they've got lots of layers. So for you guys, when you go and read them and you get given problems or ideas or concepts that you're not going through with your dog, a bit like dog and duck. Every time you do a dog and duck, you're building a new layer because your brain's been asked to think about dog training problems that particularly not your own, but that you need to think about either way. Go and read through them and see which ones you sort of agree with, what you don't agree with. If you want, go onto the website, our website, go into the activity and just say, you know, this made me think, what do I think of this? There's no right or wrong. There's nothing you're going to write that's going to make us go, well, no, you're wrong, you know that's not how we work. But some of them, you know, like for example, a lady wrote, a dog kept in a kennel will always be better worker than one living in a house. Now I don't know whether I disagree with that or agree with it, because I see the benefits and the downsides of both. So those type of things, get yourself to think. Before I end this for the evening, I'd like to thank all the trainers, all of you for being here. So I hope you've all enjoyed. I hope you've all had a fantastic evening. We will see you all next Wednesday, 8:30. And from me and from the team, good night. Thank you for listening to LWDG Pod Dog with me, Jo Parrott. Now, we all know training a dog takes time, energy and patience, but our lives can be really, really busy. Don't worry, the LWDG has got you covered. Join us for our free planning workshop where we'll show you how to use short 10-minute training sessions each day to fast forward your dog's education. Our experts have years of experience in training dogs and will help you get started on the right foot. Register now and start making progress with your furry friend today. Go to our Facebook page, the Ladies Working Dog Group, and click on the pinned post, or visit www.thelwdg.com.